The resounding message in today's gospel is to forgive. And if we expect to be pardoned, we need to pardon those who have offended us. In our gospel, the parable that Jesus gives us, there's two servants, and they're both debtors. They both owe. And servant number one owes the king 10,000 talents. And a talent is like as much gold as one man can pick up. So 10,000 of those, that's a lot. It's like equivalent to 160,000 man-years of labor. 160,000 man-years of labor, a whole lot, huge debt. Servant number two owes servant number one 100 denarii. And a denarii is like a day's wage. And so it's 100 of those, it's like a little bit less than a third of a man-year. So a very small debt compared to what servant number one owed. So you'd think, if you compare the two, it's like servant number one owes over 500,000 times as much as servant number two. So you'd think that servant number one, having been forgiven his debt, would joyfully and generously forgive servant number two because all the mercy that he had been shown. But no, he starts to strangle him and throws him in prison. And when the other servants see what happened, they tell the king, and the king throws servant number one in jail too. So what's the meaning of this parable? God is the king, and God has forgiven each one of us. We're the servants. He's forgiven each one of us a horrendous debt, huge debt, the debt of our sins, and the cost of that was the sacrifice of his son. No amount, there's no way we could ever pay that debt. And God expects us to forgive those who offended us, show them the same mercy that he shows us. But it can be difficult to forgive, as we all know. I had one uncle, my godfather, God rest his soul, who would not forgive his own daughter, my cousin, because she left her husband and she left her two kids and went down the street and married an older man from where they normally lived, just like 3 or 4 houses down. And my uncle would not forgive her from then till the time he died. And even when he died, at his funeral, he had instructions that the police would be out there, and if his daughter showed up, that she was not to be allowed in the church. Would not forgive. Another example is I have a grandfather who was in World War II and Pacific Theater. He hated the Japanese. 40 years after the war was over, we drove to Texas to see him, kids in the car, my wife, in a Nissan Stanza. And for 3 days, I heard nothing but how much he hated the Japanese and how disgusted he was with me buying a Japanese car. I mean, we have got to get to the point where we can forgive people. These grudges and things that we hold on to only damage ourselves. Jesus makes it crystal clear that there's a relationship between our being forgiven and our forgiving others. And the formula for that relationship is, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And very bluntly put, if we expect to be pardoned and forgiven by God, we need to pardon and forgive those who have offended us. And so today we should probably pray or consider praying for God, asking him to open up our eyes so that we can see where we need to be merciful, so we can joyfully and generously forgive from the heart those who have offended us.